I met Daniel during my second year of college. He wasn't the kind of guy who stood out at first glance. He was quiet, charming in an understated way, and had this calm energy that drew people in. Maybe that's what made me notice him. While everyone else was loud and busy showing off, he was simply there, steady, composed, and kind. We met at a study group, and I remember the first thing he said to me wasn't some flirtatious line or anything dramatic. He just asked if I understood a part of the assignment he was stuck on. That small, simple question turned into an hour-long conversation about music, movies, and how both of us hated small talk. By the end of it, I found myself smiling in a way I hadn't in a long time. Over the next few weeks, we started meeting more often, sometimes for coffee, sometimes to study, sometimes just to talk. I liked that he didn't rush things. There was a patience in him that felt safe. He listened when I spoke, remembered small details, and never made me feel like I had to compete for his attention. I had been in relationships before where I felt like I had to perform, to be funnier, prettier, more exciting. But with him, it was easy, natural. So when he asked me to be his girlfriend a few months later, it felt right. Not like a big cinematic moment, but something steady and genuine. I said yes, smiling through my nervous excitement. And for a while, everything really was good. We spent most of our weekends together, often just cooking or watching shows. We weren't the kind of couple that posted everything online. Our relationship existed quietly, outside of social media, and I liked it that way. We both had our own friends, our own lives, and when we came together, it felt like a calm space in the middle of all the chaos around us. But slowly, things began to shift. It started with small things. Him canceling plans last minute, texting a little less, being distracted when we talked. I tried not to read too much into it. I knew he was busy, and I didn't want to be the clingy girlfriend. But one evening, during a small house party one of his friends hosted, I saw a different side of him. That night, Daniel was unusually social. He kept moving from one group to another, laughing loudly, making jokes, and being, well, a bit of a flirt. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he was just in a good mood. But then I noticed the way he touched a girl's arm when he laughed, the way he leaned in just a little too close when another girl whispered something to him. I told myself not to overreact. I didn't want to cause a scene, but as the night went on, it started to sting, especially when I realized that he barely spent any time with me. It was as if I wasn't even there. When we finally left the party, I decided to bring it up gently. I told him calmly that it made me uncomfortable seeing him flirt with other girls. I said it softly, trying to sound more thoughtful than accusatory. He laughed. Not cruelly at first, but dismissively, as if what I said was silly. "Come on, you're overthinking it," he said. "I was just being friendly. You know how people are at parties." I nodded, but the way he brushed it off made me feel small. Like my feelings didn't matter. Over the next few weeks, this became a pattern. Every time I tried to talk about something that bothered me, he'd tell me I was being dramatic or insecure. And slowly, I started to question myself. Maybe I really was too sensitive. Maybe I needed to loosen up. Then one day, one of my friends told me something that left me speechless. She had overheard a group of Daniel's friends talking in the campus cafe. Apparently, Daniel had been telling them that I was obsessed with him, that I got jealous over everything, that I checked his phone, that I couldn't handle him talking to other girls. None of it was true. I never even asked to see his phone. I wasn't controlling or obsessive. I had only asked for respect. But he had twisted that into a story to make himself look like the easygoing guy stuck with a clingy girlfriend. I felt this cold wave of humiliation wash over me. It wasn't just about what he said. It was that he said it to people we both knew. People who probably now looked at me with pity or judgment. That night, I confronted him. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just asked, very plainly, if it was true. He didn't even deny it. He shrugged, looked at me with that half smile of his and said, "Well, I mean, you do get a little controlling sometimes. I was just joking around with the guys." Joking around. It's strange how a single phrase can make something inside you snap. Not in an explosive way, more like a quiet breaking, the soundless kind that leaves you numb. I told him that wasn't a joke. That it was cruel, but he just sighed and said I needed to learn to take things less seriously. After that, I didn't feel the same. Something in me had changed. I stopped texting him first. I stopped trying to explain my feelings. I became quieter, colder, and he noticed. But instead of reflecting, he became defensive. He started saying things like, "You're always in a mood," or "You never smile anymore." And maybe I didn't. Maybe I was too tired. Then came the night that broke whatever was left between us. It was another party, one of his close friends' birthdays. I almost didn't go, but he insisted, saying he wanted us to have fun like old times. Against my better judgment, I went. I told myself maybe this would be a fresh start. The party was loud and crowded, full of people I barely knew. Daniel was already a bit tipsy when I arrived. He came over, kissed my cheek, and handed me a drink. For the first hour, everything seemed fine. We danced a little, laughed, and I almost began to believe things were getting better. But then I saw her, his ex-girlfriend, standing near the kitchen, smiling at him like they shared some private memory. I noticed the way his face changed when he saw her. That small flicker of nostalgia, that smile that lingered too long. I watched them start talking, and before I knew it, he was right next to her, laughing, leaning in the same way he used to with me. I told myself it was okay, that he was just being polite. But deep down, my stomach was twisting. I couldn't look away. At some point, they moved closer to the living room, and I followed, keeping a small distance. The music was loud, people were laughing and dancing, and then suddenly, right there, in the middle of everyone, he kissed her. Not a small, accidental kiss, but one that made it clear it wasn't the first time he'd thought about doing it. The world seemed to go silent for a second. I couldn't even move. I just stood there, frozen, watching the person I had trusted completely betray me so openly, so carelessly. When he finally looked up and saw me, he didn't look guilty. He didn't even apologize. He just gave me this blank, almost defiant look, like daring me to react, like he wanted to prove to everyone that I was the obsessed girlfriend who couldn't handle it. I turned around and left. I didn't scream or cry in front of anyone. I didn't want to give him that satisfaction. That night, I went home, sat on my bed, and stared at the wall for a long time. It's hard to explain the kind of pain that comes not just from betrayal, but from humiliation. From realizing that the person you loved not only stopped loving you, but also made you the villain in his story. I replayed everything in my head. Every laugh, every inside joke, every small thing I had done for him, and it all felt meaningless now. But somewhere inside that sadness, a small flame began to grow. Not anger, not even hatred, just a quiet resolve. Because I realized something. He wanted to make me look weak. He wanted me to break down, to fit the image he had painted of me. But I wasn't going to give him that. I wasn't going to shout or beg or try to make him understand. No, my revenge wouldn't come through words or arguments. It would come through peace, through silence, through becoming someone he could never hurt again, and someone he'd regret losing. And that was the night I decided exactly how calm revenge really works. The morning after the party, I woke up to sunlight creeping through the curtains, the kind of light that usually feels warm, but, that day, only reminded me how much my world had shifted. Everything was quiet. My phone sat on the nightstand, lighting up every few minutes, messages from friends who had seen what happened. A few were checking in, others were gossiping under the disguise of concern. I didn't open any of them. Daniel hadn't texted me. Not an apology, not even a pathetic excuse, and strangely that told me everything I needed to know. There was no misunderstanding, no accident. What he did was deliberate, a statement. He wanted me to feel humiliated, and he wanted people to see it. I sat there for a long time, numb. I didn't cry. I think my tears had dried up before they even formed. When something breaks too completely, you don't feel sadness first. You feel emptiness. A Around noon, I finally stood up, went to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were dull, my hair tangled, my skin pale. I barely recognized the girl staring back. That's when something inside me shifted. I remember whispering to my reflection, "You don't deserve this version of yourself." It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. That day, I started taking small steps, not dramatic ones, just quiet actions to pull myself out of the fog. I cleaned my room, deleted the photos of us from my phone, and unfollowed him on every platform. I didn't block him. I wanted him to see what he had lost, slowly, over time, without me saying a single word. The next few days were hard. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that moment again. Him kissing her, the way everyone looked at me afterward. But I refused to let those images define me. I started running in the mornings. At first, I could barely make it down the block without stopping, but I kept going. The rhythm of my footsteps, the sound of my breath, it became therapy. I didn't think about him during those runs. I thought about myself, about how I had spent so much time making him happy while forgetting to nurture my own peace. In class, I kept my head down and focused. Some of our mutual friends avoided me, probably because they didn't know what to say. Others whispered behind my back. I could feel it, the way conversations would quiet when I walked in. But I learned to let silence be my shield. The more they talked, the less I reacted. That bothered Daniel more than I realized. A week after the party, he finally reached out. His message was short. "Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a few minutes before replying, "No need." That was it. No paragraphs, no explanations, just 2 words. It was the most powerful thing I'd ever said to him. He didn't reply, but I knew he read it. And that silence, that unanswered message, became my first victory. Over the next month, I poured myself into things I had neglected. I joined a creative writing workshop, started painting again, and spent time with people who made me feel lighter. I laughed more. It wasn't forced. It was real. One evening, while sitting at a cafe, sketching in my notebook, I saw Daniel walk in. He spotted me too. For a second we locked eyes. I expected to feel that familiar ache in my chest, but it didn't come. Instead, there was a strange calm, the kind you feel when you finally understand something deeply. He walked over, looking hesitant. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, and his confidence, that same confidence he used to wear like armor, seemed thinner now. "Hey," he said softly, sliding into the seat across from me. I looked at him, expressionless. "Hey," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Listen, I'm sorry. About everything. The party, what I said to people. I wasn't thinking straight." I nodded slowly. "You weren't." He paused, waiting for me to say more. But I didn't. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "You look different," he said finally. "Good different." "I am different," I said. There it was again, that flicker of surprise in his eyes, like he couldn't quite process that I was no longer orbiting around him. He started talking about how things hadn't worked out with his ex, how he'd been confused, how he missed us. The usual recycled apologies men offer when they realize the door they slammed shut doesn't open anymore. I listened quietly, not interrupting. When he finally trailed off, I just smiled faintly and said, "I hope you find peace, Daniel." That was it. I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out. I didn't turn back. And that moment, that calm, controlled goodbye, felt more satisfying than any angry outburst ever could have. Because revenge, I realized, isn't always about hurting someone back. Sometimes it's about healing so completely that their power over you disappears. But life, as it tends to do, had more in store. A few weeks later, a classmate of mine, Lily, asked if I could help organize a charity art show. She knew I painted, and she thought my work would be a great fit. I hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. It felt like the right kind of distraction. For the next month, I poured my heart into it. I stayed up late, working on canvases that reflected everything I had felt: heartbreak, anger, and finally peace. Each brushstroke felt like closure. When the exhibition finally opened, it was small but beautiful. The room was filled with soft music, warm lighting, and people genuinely appreciating art. I felt proud, not because I was showing my work, but because I had built something out of pain instead of letting it destroy me. Then, in one of life's strange twists, Daniel showed up. I didn't invite him, but word must have spread around campus. He walked in with that same unsure energy I'd seen before, glancing around awkwardly. When he saw my name on the wall next to my paintings, he froze. He came up to me, voice low. "You did all this?" I nodded. "Yeah." He looked around again, and I could see the realization in his eyes, that while he was busy trying to impress people at parties, I had quietly built something meaningful. Something lasting. "These are amazing," he said, almost to himself. I thanked him politely, nothing more. I didn't gloat, didn't try to make him feel small. I didn't need to. My calm confidence spoke for itself. After the show, people came up to compliment me, even professors I had admired from afar. They talked about how my paintings felt honest and vulnerable. Daniel stood off to the side, watching. For the first time, he wasn't the center of attention. I was. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone for a while, surrounded by my paintings. I thought about how far I had come, from that girl standing frozen at a party to someone who could stand on her own and feel whole. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. But as time passed, my calm revenge began to unfold naturally, without any plotting or scheming. It happened in subtle ways, the kind that life arranges for you when you least expect it. A few months later, Daniel started reaching out again. Not in a desperate way, but with that hesitant tone of someone realizing they made a mistake too late. He'd comment on my posts, send casual "how are you" messages. I ignored most of them. One day, he showed up at the cafe where I still went every Sunday to read or sketch. He asked if he could sit with me, and I allowed it. Partly out of curiosity, partly because I no longer cared enough to say no. He talked about how things in his life weren't going great. He had drifted from his friends, his grades had slipped, and he felt like he was stuck. I listened quietly, sipping my coffee. Then he said something that made me pause. "You always had things together," he said softly. "I didn't realize how strong you were until after I lost you." There it was, the quiet moment of realization, the moment he finally saw what I had known all along, that calm doesn't mean weak, and silence doesn't mean surrender. I looked at him, smiled gently, and said, "You didn't lose me, Daniel. You let me go." He didn't have an answer for that. When I left the cafe that day, I felt lighter than ever before. Because true revenge isn't about making someone suffer. It's about becoming untouchable. Someone who no longer needs their validation or apology. I had become that person. And for the first time in a long while, I was completely, peacefully free. But my story, my calm revenge, wasn't finished yet. Because sometimes the universe decides to add its own final touch, the kind that no one can plan or predict. And that's exactly what happened next. It's strange how time softens everything. The sharp edges of anger, the sting of betrayal. They fade almost quietly, without you noticing. Months passed since that last conversation with Daniel at the cafe. My life had become simple, peaceful, and beautifully ordinary. I woke up early, worked on my art, went for long walks, and found a rhythm that no longer depended on anyone else's presence. I used to think closure came from confrontation, from getting the perfect apology, or making someone see the pain they caused. But real closure, I learned, is quieter. It's when you no longer need to look back at all. One morning, I received an email from a small art magazine that had seen photos from our campus exhibition. They wanted to feature my paintings in an upcoming issue about young emerging artists. I read the message 3 times before it sank in. It wasn't a huge publication, but it was something, a door opening, slowly but surely. When the article came out, it was titled Turning Pain into Peace, The Art of Healing Through Creation. They had interviewed me, and I had spoken openly, not about Daniel or the breakup, but about how heartbreak had taught me patience, and how healing is an art form of its own. I didn't expect much attention, but the story resonated. People shared it, sent me kind messages, and a local gallery even reached out for a collaboration. And that's how my calm revenge began to unfold, not through a plan, but through purpose. Meanwhile, I'd still see Daniel around sometimes. We went to the same university after all. Every time our paths crossed, there was an awkward tension in the air, mostly from his side. I'd smile politely, exchange a brief hi, and move on. He, on the other hand, looked like someone who wanted to say 1,000 things but couldn't find the words anymore. One afternoon, I was sitting outside the library when one of his friends, the same group he used to brag to about me, walked over. I hadn't spoken to them in months. The guy smiled awkwardly, almost sheepish. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I think Daniel really messed things up with you. He knows it too." I smiled politely. "That's between him and his conscience." He laughed quietly. "Yeah, I guess it is. You know, it's kind of ironic. Back then, he used to tell us you were obsessed with him, but now, he's the one who can't stop talking about you." That comment stayed with me. Not because it made me proud, but because it confirmed something I'd already started to see. The shift in power. The quiet reversal that happens when you choose peace over revenge. I didn't have to destroy his reputation. He did that himself. As time went on, I noticed how differently people treated me compared to him. The same people who once pitied me now respected me. They saw the calm in me, the strength that came from not reacting. Meanwhile, Daniel had become almost invisible, a shadow of the confident boy he once was. Rumors floated around about how he was struggling with classes, how his new relationships never lasted. I didn't feel joy in hearing that. Just a strange kind of balance, as if the universe was quietly correcting its own scale. Then came a moment I never expected. One of my art pieces, a painting I had done during my darkest days, showing a woman standing calmly in the middle of a storm, was selected for a regional student exhibition. It was a big deal. Professors, critics, and even local journalists would attend. The night of the exhibition, I dressed simply but confidently. A long black dress, minimal makeup, hair tied back. My goal wasn't to impress anyone. I just wanted to be present, to enjoy what I had built. The gallery was softly lit, music playing in the background. People were walking around, murmuring thoughtful comments about the pieces. I was speaking to one of the curators when I noticed Daniel standing at the far end of the room. He looked uncertain, holding a program in his hand. For a moment, our eyes met, just briefly, and then he looked away. I could have ignored him. I almost did, but something in me, that calm assurance I had grown into, told me not to hide from my own story. After the crowd thinned out, he finally approached. His expression was different this time. No arrogance, no defensiveness. Just quiet regret. "Your work is incredible," he said softly. "I didn't know you could do all this." "Neither did I said with a small smile. "Pain teaches you things." He nodded, looking at the painting. "Is this about what happened between us?" I shrugged. "Maybe a little, but it's mostly about letting go." He stayed quiet for a while, eyes still on the painting. Then he said something I'll never forget. "I used to tell people you were obsessed with me," he admitted. "But I think I was the one obsessed, with being admired, with being in control. I didn't realize it until it was too late." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The silence between us said more than words ever could. Finally, he looked at me again. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." I took a deep breath and smiled. Not out of pity, not out of forgiveness, but out of peace. "I accept your apology," I said gently. "And I truly hope you find your own peace too." He nodded, eyes glistening slightly, and then walked away. I watched him leave, not with bitterness, but with a deep sense of closure. The story was finally done. After that night, I never saw Daniel again. Not in person, at least, but sometimes his name would pop up on social media, liking one of my art posts or following my work silently from afar. I never blocked him. Let him look, I thought. Let him see the life I built without him. That was my calm revenge. Not revenge in the traditional sense, but a quiet reminder that I had turned his cruelty into creation. The next year, my art began to gain recognition beyond campus. I was invited to speak at a small community event about resilience and creativity. I told my story, not about Daniel specifically, but about how betrayal can become a turning point if you let it. People came up to me afterward, some even in tears, thanking me for sharing something they could relate to. That's when I realized something powerful. My calm revenge wasn't just about me anymore. It had become something bigger, a story of healing that others could draw strength from. One evening, months later, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Daniel again. He wrote, "I read your interview. You've really grown into someone incredible. I'm glad you're doing well. I wish I had treated you better." I stared at the message for a long time. There was a time when something like that would have reopened the wound, but now it didn't. I smiled, put my phone down, and didn't reply. That silence, calm, steady, deliberate, was the final chapter of my revenge. Because revenge isn't always about action. Sometimes it's about absence, about the quiet realization that your peace is the one thing they can never reclaim once they've lost it. I think about that younger version of myself sometimes, the one who stood frozen at that party, heartbreaking while trying not to cry. I wish I could tell her that everything she went through would one day make sense, that the same moment that shattered her would also rebuild her into someone stronger, calmer, and freer. Now, when I paint, I don't think of Daniel. I think of all the women and men who've been made to feel small, who've been told they're too much, too emotional, or obsessed, just for asking to be treated with respect. My art, my peace, my growth, they've become the quiet revolution that no betrayal can undo. A year later, I moved to a new city for a residency program. New faces, new streets, new energy. I was walking home one evening, watching the city lights flicker, when I realized something. I hadn't thought about him in months. Not once. The memory didn't hurt anymore. It was just a story I had lived and outgrown. And that's the thing about calm revenge. It doesn't explode. It doesn't announce itself. It unfolds quietly, over time, in the way you carry yourself, in the way your life blossoms after someone tried to break you. It's in your laughter, your peace, your success, and in their silence. Sometimes I still get messages from people who've seen my art or heard my story online. They tell me it gave them courage to walk away from their own painful situations. That, to me, is the most beautiful form of closure there is. Because the truth is, revenge doesn't have to be cruel to be complete. It can be kind, calm, and deeply satisfying, especially when it's wrapped in peace. And if there's one thing I've learned through it all, it's this. The best revenge is not proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right, by living well, by growing, by choosing calm over chaos every single time. So, to anyone listening, if you've ever been betrayed, humiliated, or made to feel small, don't rush to get even. Let time do that for you. Focus on your healing, your growth, your own story, because nothing disarms a cruel person more than seeing you shine without needing them. That's what I did. That's what calm revenge truly means. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you in any way, or if you found a piece of yourself in it, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to my Calm Revenge. Every week, I share stories of quiet strength, real emotions, and peaceful power. Stories that remind us that the calmest hearts often hold the strongest fire. Until next time, take care, and remember, peace is the most powerful revenge of all.